Wow. I think I know quite a lot of people here, but in case not, I'm Jane Aronson, I'm the present director of the school. So it's my enormous pleasure to welcome everybody as we sort of gather in. And it feels like quite the gathering. I know some of you were at the Wine and Cheese last night, so we already kind of started the spirit of the thing then. But we've got here people from the full span of the school's 40 years. Grads, 6 grads from the first class. 3 came down from North Bay, yes? Montreal's mighty. We've got grads from the beginning, in 1968. We've got current students in large numbers there, and scattered. I see numbers of very newly minted MSWs, which is really nice. And people who are returning from all those years in between. And also, I think we've both got current faculty, retired faculty, a lovely mix of the people who make up our community in terms of field instructors and sessional instructors who we welcome into the school to teach particular classes. And it feels really great, and welcome all of you. And it feels too like I got such a sense of this last night, like a real sort of what you expect of a reunion, I guess, a real sort of generational procession moment. I remember in a class I once took on gerontology, somebody having this image of generational progressions, and the visual image was of elephants going one by one, trunk to tail, moving through time. And the 40 yearsness of our gathering today kind of took on a new shape for me last night, because I think I said this to some people last night. I found myself having to say to people at the door, I've only been here 20 years. And then we had some moments where this will only make sense to those of you who go further back, where people were saying, well, how do I get to the student centre? I don't know where the student centre is. And Lorraine was clarifying and said, well, that's where the portables are, by the Gilmore Hall, by that piece of grass with the tree. So it's been a reflective kind of time when you reorient yourself in terms of time. Probably like all of us, it's also made me think of my beginning here and the things that come to mind as you think through your own passageway through this school. And it made me think about when I was hired on faculty. It's not really 20 years ago, I said that because it sounded large, it's 19 and a bit, but Susan Watt was the director who hired me, and I remember they can be very daunting kind of days, interview days like that. And, there were some daunting people in the room for the talk I had to give, but right beside me, on my right, was a man I didn't know and I unfortunately missed because he'd gone by the time I arrived. Michael Wheeler sat beside me, and he was this gentle, soft, calming presence that kind of got rid of the daunt. And that was lovely. And I also remember that day that Sally Palmer just happened to come into the room where I was being nervous to tell me that she'd met somebody I knew when she was in England. And that sort of settled me down. So you think of people, and I then think as I move through here myself, I then think particularly of Ewan, who was the director in the middle part of my time here, and who was one of the most kindly presences in my trajectory, and had a lovely way as director. He won't look at me now. Of drawing people in and building on people's strengths. So I find myself thinking about people a lot in that way, as I'm sure lots of you do too. And I also was thinking about like the environment, the physical environment, especially for those who have not been back for a while. It's changed enormously, but you kind of expect that. But just I think about the work environment and the technology that governs things now in a way that was 20 years ago was so different. So I think we used to have those little pink telephone messages, remember? And I also remember, which doesn't necessarily put me in a good light, when the school moved from Togo Salmon Hall, which some of more senior among us know as RX1 or RX2 or something like that. Anyway, we moved from Togo Seton Hall to Kenneth Taylor Hall, and I think it must have been Diane who said to me, as she did to everybody else, well, we'll get the computer hookup for you to have email in your office and stuff like that. And I remember looking at her and saying, I don't ever want that. I'm never going to need that. We needn't pay for that. I don't want that. And I thought I was going to work out my time talking to people on the phone. I never realized email would take us over. So all those things have happened, and I hope we've left plenty of time today, I think we have in the program, for people to mingle and connect and spend social time and visit, remembering those kinds of things together. And in addition to that mingling social part of today, we also, as you know, have a program and content. I hope it will prove equally nourishing and equally fun, and I hope also equally strengthening in a way, because in a sense this rebuilds and fortifies us as a community, and I think there's a lot in the program to do that. The planning committee for today, who I'll acknowledge later, as you know from the material you've got, chose the theme social work and social justice. And I guess social work's alignment with a social justice agenda has always been a very central feature of the school. And I think our mission, as it's stated now and back then, makes clear that we see it as our work to understand individuals and communities' distress in the context of the social conditions that give rise to it. And whether they are regressive social policies or systemic social inequities, patterns of oppression. And I think we've always tried, and it's hard work, and analytically and practically, to situate all the practices of social work, whether that's with individuals, families, communities, in advocacy, in policy, in research, whatever form of practice it is and the skill required, we've always strived to situate it in that analysis, that we're attentive to both the individual manifestations of social struggle and their origins. And that ethos and that purpose goes back and owes a great debt of gratitude to the school's founding director, Harry Penny. Yeah. So I lost what to say about Harry. Harry's sitting right here with Goldie, his wife, and we're delighted that you've joined us today. And you're going to see yourself a lot and hear a lot about yourself because of your significance in this place and your legacy in this place. For those of you who don't know or only know Harry as a name, he was the founding director of the school. He was the director of the Hamilton Social Planning and Research Council. And he brought into building the school and the undergraduate program in the first place a commitment to the ethos I just described, that social work's about social justice and that it's a school's business to be attuned to its community and to the challenges in a wider social world. And some years ago, Harry wrote a memoir about the school, and I'm going to read a little bit from it because he quotes in there something he said at the official opening of the school in 1968. A school of social work, if it's to be vital, must relate to the local community, show concern about community problems and needs, and become involved in ways that are direct and personal. On the other hand, the school must always be sharply aware of the impelling social issues at national and provincial levels and be concerned about the welfare of people everywhere. That statement in 1968, I keep saying 1968 because schools didn't talk like that in 1968 for the most part, I think has rippled and trickled through our ethos and the way we've tried to be as a school. It's always a work in progress since then. So I think about the particular character of the BA-BSW program, the MA in social welfare policy, and the way that we've tried to do our work, basically. And in that book as well, quite at the beginning, you may not remember this, you said something like, I'm making this memoir about the first 15 years, I think, and that's all I'm doing. There's a statement about that's it for me. And it so clearly is not it for you, partly because of the symbolism of your legacy, but also, right now, we're reminded of your presence again, because as the school just launched its PhD program in social justice, Harry and Goldie and their sons generously donated an Ontario graduate scholarship for a graduate student doing work on social policy and social justice. So just at the moment when we need buttress and resources and energy for that, in they come again. Thank you. One last thing to note, and then I'll move the spotlight, is that Harry celebrated his 90th birthday last week. Talking about the PhD and it beginning makes me want to do a little segue into just saying a few things about what's going on in the school at the moment, what's new, what preoccupies us, what we're aspiring to. The PhD is new, it's hot off the press. And we've just admitted our first 4 students. It's in the context of Canadian... This is always dangerous because I can't see that well from here, but I know, and it's getting worse. Several of them are here. Sherilyn Van Berkel, Laura O'Neill, Sherilyn Van Berkel, Laura O'Neill. And Winnie Lowe may be here or is coming later, but it's delightful having them with us. The 4th student is a wonderful man called Randy Jackson. And just even as we start into the first term and feel their presence with us in the halls, in classes, stimulating things, it gives a real taste of, I guess, the whole purpose of the endeavor, to build a community of scholarship to do with social work and social justice, and to sort of, we hope, start preparing people for academic positions, positions of leadership in the field. And it's just very exciting. It feels very buoyant. Another sort of aspiration and focus of attention in the school, particularly at the moment, it's been ongoing and long-standing, is our wish to expand our capacity in teaching and research with Aboriginal communities. We're hoping to have an Aboriginal scholar join us on faculty, probably in the new year, and we're moving ahead with things like recruitment strategies in high school, so that we navigate the issues of access and barriers that have been there for so long institutionally, and which we have to learn about and work with as we go. And they're difficult processes, they're challenging processes, but we're moving, and that also feels very exciting. And one of the reasons why it feels like we need to restate that aspiration, I think it gives it new urgency, is that Bill Lee retired this year. And many of you know Bill, he's sitting there. He's back, he's not really retired. In fact, I don't think of him that way at all. As many of you will know, Bill's work for a long time focused around community development, Aboriginal community issues, and he was a huge strength to us in that regard. And I say flippantly, he's not gone, he's still teaching, and we hope that will remain so for a long time. Another thing that we're trying to fold in and thread a lot in the school at the moment is attention to poverty and anti-poverty activism. It probably goes without saying, which is problematic in itself, that most of the people that social workers see in practice struggle with insufficient resources, poor housing, material want, basically. And there are a lot of local initiatives at the moment in Hamilton addressing poverty, poverty reduction roundtable. Happily, there are some initiatives on campus striving to take that up as well. There's thing called the McMaster Poverty Initiative. There's the beginnings of a living wage campaign on campus. So there's local stuff happening. And the school's also very energetically wanted to endorse the provincial 25 in 5 campaign, which many of you will know about, its aspiration being to reduce poverty by 25% in 5 years. And I'm really pleased today that Mike Balkwell, who is sitting there next to Bill, who many of you will remember as a grad and a distinguished community developer and teacher for us at many times. Mike Balkwell is the coordinator of that provincial campaign. He'll be happy to talk to anybody if they'd like to. We've also got here, I've lost her completely now, Brooke Camplin over there, who's going to be sitting outside at different times during the day with postcards for the 25 in 5 campaign, and we'll invite you to fill those in, take them back to the organizations where you work, the communities where you live, to get that process rolling in other ways too. We also have in the school at the moment a delightfully energetic student association who are doing some lovely work, both in mobilizing their fellows, mentoring, nipping at our heels to make sure we're alert and attentive to their needs, their perception of what we should be doing. Last night, for those of you who were there, you'll have seen a lovely PowerPoint presentation that they have put together for the undergraduate orientation just passed, that both passed on the wisdoms of how to survive this place, and also communicated a real sense of the aspirations in the program. I remember seeing one of your slides go by was the Margaret Mead quote about the only way that social change has ever occurred is if a few citizens move and gather together. She said it better than that. But they're both weaving in a huge amount of substance into their work and building community and sharing the energy that comes with that, and that's just great, and we really appreciate it. And I almost forgot again. Also outside here during the day, they'll have a little table and they will sell School of Social Work hoodies that are apparently extremely nice hoodies. And they're also been chosen with care, not just because they're extremely nice hoodies, but because they're made with organic materials, they are attentive to good labor practices, and they'll be a good thing, and they'll be a fundraiser, and they'll keep you warm. Just last, I guess, the other thing to note about what's happening in the school, or to just sort of map out a little, is that we also, naturally, are in a process of generational change. We've had a number of retirements in the last few years, and we have a lot of new faculty as well, which is enormously energizing. People bring with them attention to social and substantive issues that we've wanted to fortify for a long time. They bring connections to communities and diverse forms of knowledge building that also matter to us to mix up and grow with and learn from. It's challenging, and I keep wanting to say the school's a work in progress, and that's a really healthy thing, I think. Later today, in the afternoon, before and during the reception, we'll do the geography later, there'll be a display of some faculty current research, some MSW thesis research, also a lovely PowerPoint that'll also try to communicate the kind of work that people are doing, the kind of work that they're publishing, the kinds of community ties that they have. But just for now, if my colleagues don't mind it, I'm just going to ask you to, I'll do the speaking because I've got a microphone and I'm in charge. I just ask you each to stand up, just so people know who you are, and then can maybe come and chat more easily during the day. And if I don't see, help me out. At that table I see Mirna Carranza, who joined us 2 or 3 years ago. Up. Thank you. At the table beside I see Rick Sin, who joined us. Rick joined us also a couple of years ago. He and Mirna are nicely in step. Chris Sinding is right here. Chris has an appointment appointment that's half in the school and half in the Department of Health, Aging and Society, so that gives us a nice bridge. And another person who gives us a nice bridge to the Institute on Globalization and the Human Condition is Rachel Cho, who's over in the back. Down here closer to me is Sheila Salmon, who I don't need to introduce. Now the bifocals are tested. There, we have two new colleagues, newly with us and delightfully so. Anne Fudge Shormans, who's also an MSW grad here, and Sarah Green beside her. Now I'm struggling. There are other, Sandy Preston, yay! Hidden in the crowd. There are other colleagues going to be joining us at different times in the day. Some of them are helping with setup and prep in other areas, and maybe I'll identify them as we go. Another thing that struck me about the gathering, the thinking back over 40 years, some of the newness, is that inevitably as well, I think today in the gathering is going to remind us of people we've lost. And we're going to have different memories depending on our time and our partial vision of that, but the people who come to mind for me who died in recent years, one particularly notably, and we'll see her today, is Jean Jones, who was a former director of the school, one of the early faculty members that Harry recruited, and an enormously important part of the school's history. I think also of Wendy Weeks, who I didn't know here, but who was one of the first women in Canadian social work at that time who really stirred up a feminist analysis in social work, and I knew her from a distance. I didn't work with her here. I also think of two staff people who've died in the recent past. Brenda Scalva, who was a graduate secretary for us for a long time, and also Brenda Allgar, who was an undergrad secretary. Different ones of you will remember different angles, I know. And I think also in terms of losses, the undergraduate students are acutely aware at the moment of the fact that an undergrad student called Maggie Murray died over the summer. And we actually had a lovely memorial service. We planted a little oak tree close by the faculty club. If you're going walking and you see a newly minted oak tree, that would be Maggie's tree. So I think the gathering makes us think of those people rightly. And I think it also brings for me into focus as well the more life stage transitional things that have happened in between. So I'm going immediately to faculty retirement. And I did have a feeling when I started as director, it felt like for the first 4 years, all I was doing was arranging retirement. I didn't think it had anything to do with me. Pat Danza has just retired on September the 1st. And she's a significant sort of absence for us. Bill Lee retired closely before that, 6 months before, but as I say, is still teaching. Ralph Brown retired the year before. I think Ralph will be here later today, a former director of the school. Jim Rice retired. He was my first go at planning retirement. And also, in the more recent, a little bit further away, Ewan retired, Sally Palmer retired. Sally's here, Ewan's there. So lots of changes, and I guess the changes then bring me to the program, because thinking generationally, content-wise, the shape of the program, if you look at it in your little piece of paper, the morning part of our program is to do with looking back, reflecting back, in a sense, situating ourselves in the school and social work against 40 years of social change, and thinking about how that all relates. In the afternoon, we're going to turn to looking at the future and thinking about what we need to have on our radar as trends in the present, worries in the present, concerns about things regressive in the present, and how to take them up, how to imagine social work's future. For that part of the program, we've got a delightful panel of a mix of characters who come from different backgrounds in practice and social activism, who will talk from their perspectives. And following that, we've also got a keynote speech from Marge Wright-Smith-Street, who's sitting over there, another grad of this school, and she's going to share some thoughts on her images of the future and puzzles with which we need to engage. And in the evening, as I think you all know, in a way we lift our gaze globally and think about social justice, the practice of social justice on a global scale. And Stephen Lewis will be here to talk to that title. Before we move to the morning part, just a couple of practical pieces, lest you forget. In between those substantial things, there's breakfast, there's coffee, there's lunch. There are all the practical things we need. And there'll also be, if you like, the possibility of taking some campus tours. We'll talk about that later, ask at the registration desk. And when I'm thinking about the registration desk where you came in, the Alumni Art Advancement Office has managed all the logistical background of this process beautifully. John Popham's not in the room, I think, but I'll want to thank him at some point. He's leading the charge out there. If you've any questions, any practical thought, problem solving needing to be done, ask them. If any questions about accessibility of washrooms or navigating campus accessibly, also ask them and they'll be able to help you. And while I want to thank, there are a few other people I just want to thank quickly. While the Alumni Advancement Office has done a lot of the planning logistically, inevitably a lot of it fell into the school office. And I'd like to thank the school's administrative staff. That's Lorna O'Connell, who's there. Darlene Savoy, who I think is coming later, and Diane Allen, who's sitting here. I have to say one other thing about Diane, and I have to say it quickly because she won't tolerate long. One day next week, Diane goes to a celebratory lunch on campus to honor people who've worked at MAC for 35 years. And all those 35 years have been in the school. So Diane bears knowledge of the social ties between us, of history, of change in the institution, of knitting us together, and she is the most outstandingly skilled colleague, and we've been so lucky. And I'd also like to thank Sheila Salmon, who has been the faculty member inside the school, who has been most central to organising and getting us on track, and who at times will prompt me in my emceeing and is probably looking at me now thinking, oh, for God's sake, it's on with it, we're running over time. So, I'm going to stop, but I'm going to introduce the morning program, which is going to be an absolute treat. I'm going to introduce Brenda Simmons-Moulton, who's going to MC us through it. And a lot of you know Brenda. She's also a graduate of the school. She's been a field instructor for more decades than I care to think about. She now teaches the field instruction course. She was a full-time faculty colleague for a couple of years, and she's been the most energetic, stalwart supporter of the school. And she's going to lead this charge.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jane. Veronica Ray, in her book, I Can Make a Difference, says, few, if any of us, ever realize the far-reaching effects of our existence. The consequences of our choices and actions spread out into the world like ripples of water, affecting many people in many ways we could never imagine. The whole world is different because of each and every one of us. Making a difference is why many of us went into social work. Under the theme of social work and social justice, today we've put together an exciting and creative program that not only reflects on social justice theme over the past 40 years, but challenges each of us to remember our roots in social work, to impact others and our whole world. This morning we're going to focus on looking back, a retrospective perspective. We start the morning with a dynamic PowerPoint with music and pictures which will reflect on the themes of each of the decades, with the speaker commenting on their social work experience. We'd really like to thank Lloyd McKenzie from the Community Center for Media Arts for helping us put the PowerPoint together. Thank you, Lloyd. A special thank you to Lindsay King and Megan Ross, who spent hours toiling over pictures and putting them all together for this PowerPoint. And Christian Smith, who spent lots of time enjoying some very good music and helped put music together for the PowerPoint, and we'll hear more of the music tonight at dinner and probably throughout the day. We'd also like to thank Lisa Watt, who's here in spirit. She has friends visiting, and Lisa had the vision to bring Lloyd on, so a special thank you to Lisa for all her work on the committee. While I promised I wouldn't give away any age, we will be starting the day with Lorraine Chapman, who is one of our first graduates. She will be followed by Rocco Ghizzarelli, representing 1979 to 88. Randy Shiga will follow Rocco from 1989 to 98. And finally, Bonnie Freeman will be commenting on 1999 to 2008 decade. And Dr. Jim Rice will anchor each section with his reflections from the school and the time. The PowerPoint will be followed by a break and a chance to network, and then we'll be dividing into groups geared to our decade, where we'll have a chance to reflect on our time in the school and where we think social work may be going. You all should have received a paper on the tables that would assign you to a group, and if you have any questions, please come and ask Sheila about that. And we hope you'll have the opportunity to connect with each other. Each group will be facilitated by a group leader, and we will have a chance to add to the timelines, which if you look around the room are here, and again a thank you to Megan and Lindsay for all of their hard work in putting that together. I also would like to thank some students who actually originally put the timeline together, which would include Lindsay Green, Julie Lewis, Julia Page, Evans Adachi Neframa, and Marie McCurry, in which they did this as part of a class project and really gave us the basis for what we were trying to put together. Following a group discussion, we ask each of you to return to the room back here, so we have a few minutes to hear reflections from the other groups and our experiences before we break for lunch. We really hope that you enjoyed the show. We had a fabulous time putting it together.